Uh, Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm here at CJ's place, and we're going to be talking about three things. We're going to be talking about his upcoming book. Second, we're going to be doing a review of all the meetups that he has done, all the essays that he has done, so that we can get key ideas. Now, of course, we're not going to be able to do justice to the essays. We're going to be going through them very fast, but the purpose is to get you motivated to read the essays again and watch the meetups again, because we're going to be discussing them in our Friday series on deep conversations. So that's the second part, review of the 14 meetups that he's already done. The third part is I'm going to keep notes from the second part, and I'm going to talk to CJ about connecting some of the ideas that come from that. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So welcome, CJ.
Welcome, Tupper Darby.
Thank you. So CJ, tell me about this book. I'm so excited about the book. So please tell us about what you're doing.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the book. So I came up with the idea of collaborating for comprehensivism in late 2019. And with the opportunity you provided at 52 Living Ideas to start this series on Comprehensivist Wednesdays, I've been trying to imagine how to build this idea of collaborating for comprehensivism. And one of the ways in our culture we document ideas is put it in a compact form, a book. But it's such a new idea that I am still figuring it out. One of the journey we've been on going through these events has been a journey for me of discovery. I couldn't have written the last thing until the previous ones were done. It's building itself and creating itself, and it keeps changing. So it's but the basic idea is that we need in our culture more. It's a democracy. Theoretically, people need to understand how the world works, and they need to understand each other. And to do that through interactive, dialogue-based events. And how do you do that? And what are the bases for such a discussion? So my idea is that the basic idea of learning, typically we think of learning from subjects and courses, Aristotle's Oregonum or the university program for this, that, or the other major. And that doesn't bring us to a comprehensive awareness of how the world works. You might understand computer science very well, but do you really understand how the world works? The university isn't designed to produce that. So how do you do that? What is the basic understanding of learning in order to understand how the world works, to understand why and how each of us believes so many disparate things, which our media keeps telling us puts us at edge with each other, and all this acrimony and well, maybe it's because the way we've approached learning hasn't been comprehensive enough, hasn't been inclusive enough. And as I think about it, who's to say which tradition of inquiry and action we should start with? So this comprehensive approach to understanding how the world works and what we can know of each other it changes how we should learn from a basic perspective. And so the most of the events to date have been trying to inquire how do you start a discussion and a learning process where you're coming to understand how the world works in all its magnificent complexity, understand each other. How do you do that? And I hope I've laid that out to some extent. And who is the audience to the book? I have a good friend from college, Al McMahon, and he and I were talking a month or so ago. And through that discussion, I came to realize that what we really need are more organizers of this kind of comprehensive learning, comprehensive thinking, comprehensive inquiry and action. And so one of the objectives of the book is going to be to help participants organize their own inquiries, organize their own events, organize their own sessions at 52 Living Ideas, at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, or in their own groups, maybe face-to-face groups, maybe, and the series of events so far has been designed to help me think through what needs to go into such a book to help such a comprehensive learner actually approach the project of coming to next Wednesday's topic is to put it all together, coming to understand all and put it all together. Can that be done, and how would it be done?
Fantastic. So firstly, I want to say this is a open invitation to anybody. If anybody wants to organize events in this direction of comprehensivism, get in touch with me at 52 Living Ideas, get in touch with CJ at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. It would be wonderful. We are always looking for more organizers of events. So please contact us. All right. So how about looking at what we have done so far? Because this is very close to my heart. This is exactly what we're doing at 52 Living Ideas. So that's why this, collaboration with you has been very special, because before we heard of each other, we were independently trying to do the same thing or very similar things. And at 52 Living Ideas, we discuss different topics, whether from Chinese philosophy or comprehensivism as such, religion, art, all kinds of things. So this is exactly along the lines of what we do, like day in and day out. What I want to do now is to look at the past meetups that you have done, past essays that we have done, to see a pattern, so people get an appreciation of what has already been done, and then use that as a base. The first one that you did was the great human traditions of thought and action, right? Inquiry and action. Yes, inquiry and action. So what would you say I want to go through all the 14 ones that you've done so far. I know it's a very difficult thing to remember everything, but can we just speak for a few minutes on each of them so that people get an idea of what we have covered so far? And then we can talk about where this is going.
Yeah, so that first event, I believe that was July 2020.
Yes.
Comprehensivity and comprehensivist are terms that our Buckminster Fuller used. And a lot of my base of thinking is in Buckminster Fuller's work about that I've been abstracting and when you interpret someone's work, you pick and choose which parts to put together. And I've found a number of threads in Buckminster Fuller's thinking that form this comprehensivity, this comprehensive thinking. But what I discovered is that when I try to just study Bucky's works, I get into a tunnel vision, and it takes me away from the comprehensive, even though Bucky gives this cosmic perspective. And so I've been working on this book, The Design Way. And this book has the notion of traditions of inquiry and action. And so that first event was my attempt to take this Bucky idea and put it in the language of the design way, to start thinking about it a little more anthropologically, a little bit more culturally, and that very beginning, the first step, that was the very first step. It was trying to introduce the idea that the sources from which we can gain knowledge of the other and how the world works come from prior art, the prior traditions of inquiry and action that others have prototyped for us. None of us have to figure it all out from scratch. When we're born, we're thrown into a society that's already existing, that already has libraries, that already have, and one of the challenges for someone trying to learn how the world works is which traditions of inquiry and action to use. And some people might say, well, the classical Greek tradition, but that leaves out the Chinese. It leaves out the great Vedic traditions, the Buddhist tradition. It leaves out the American Indians, the Aborigines in Australia. So can we broaden our perspective to traditions of inquiry and action, and then start sampling and trying to find the ones that might help us? And so that first one was a baby step introduction to the idea that comprehensivism is in part learning about the cultural heritage that planet-wise we have inherited.
Wonderful. I mean, the thing that really remains with me from that meetup is not just looking at one thinker or along one particular discipline, but looking at just inquiry, action. So the idea universe, the material universe, social structures, experiences, those four categories. So what you're trying to do is that you're trying to broaden the discussion and saying, these are the four different things. And so many cultures across so much time have so much to say about each of these things. So look at all of that and build your own method based on integrating that. So that was amazing. What was the second one? Let me see.
The necessities and impossibilities of comprehensivism. So that one expanded on the initial idea. If we're going to take all of humanity's traditions of inquiry and action, we're not going to play elitism and pick one or two as the right traditions and dismiss the rest as the errant traditions of, those people that don't understand. We have this Herculean task of, how do you learn about them? There are so many. What do you make of them? And so that essay was split into a series of arguments why it's necessary that we actually aspire to comprehensivism. And then it was a broad critique, the critique coming from the design way again. The design way has these three paralyses that can come from a comprehensivist approach. Analysis paralysis, when we try to go in so much depth of one tradition or that we feel we cannot proceed until we actually understand exactly what Aristotle meant. And so we can't move on to Aboriginal thought until we get Aristotle. You're never going to get to comprehensivism. You're never going to, analysis paralysis can interfere with our aspiration to come to understand it all and put it all together. Then there's value paralysis. In our learning, we have epistemic values, values of what is valuable knowing or valuable learning. Everyone has these. We usually just assume that we know the right way, and anyone who doesn't think the right way is erroneous thinking, magical thinking or mystical or non-scientific thinking. But in fact, all thinkers, even theologians and magicians, have rules about what they value as good knowledge. And when we become comprehensive, how do you integrate the most materialist scientist with the most spiritual theologian? How do you integrate the Taliban and Al-Qaeda with the US government? And, how do your values collide? And in any investigation, if you permit all values and you assume all values in an unlimited way, you run into this paralysis. Well, we've got to first negotiate the dispute between Joe Biden and al-Khwarizmi of Al-Qaeda, that's going to take a while. You'll never get to all the other value systems that might be perhaps more helpful in coming to understand it all and learning how the world works. So if we don't limit the values that we bring to a discussion, at least temporarily for the purpose of this discussion, we get paralyzed. And the third paralysis that we are in danger of, that shows that comprehensivism is an impossibility to some extent, is the paralysis of holism. The idea that in order to come to understand it all and put it all together, we have to create a whole that accommodates everything, all history, all humanity. This is daunting. And if we don't limit ourselves in forming an adequate whole and try to get the whole, the entirety, put it all in, we may become paralyzed in trying to define a whole that's beyond our current capacity.
Wonderful. My favorite thing about this particular essay and the meetup was the emphasis you have on clearly understanding our limits and working within them, accepting the limits, because many times people don't acknowledge, people do not notice, acknowledge, or accept the limits and try to proceed regardless of that. That doesn't go anywhere. Those limits remain what they are. So kind of accepting the limits and working while being cognizant of the limits and working within the limits as best as you can. So that kind of realistic estimation of both our limits and our ambitions. of what we are trying to do and what our limits are. So wonderful.
Yeah. I don't know if it got into that essay, but right now it's occurring to me that it's very important to realize that this comprehensive learning, comprehensive inquiry and action is an aspiration. It's all of our ethics and values are aspirational. We may not fully achieve them. We may not, with these paralyses, we recognize that if we try too hard, we might actually stymie our efforts. And so I think it's important in considering that essay, whether it was included in the text or not, how the aspiration balances with the challenge and a full recognition of both the challenge and the prospect, the aspiration and the limits that are needed. And we need to experiment. Maybe we limited ourselves too much, and the next time we go into that subject, we want to expand. Or maybe we didn't restrain ourselves enough and we got into a nightmarish, vast desert scene where we couldn't find the oasis with nourishment. Comprehensive thinking is not necessarily something that you know how to do to begin with. You try and you say, this time I fell into one of the paralyses. This time I learned a lot, but I wasn't expansive enough. I didn't try hard enough to include it all. And finding that balance is something I'm still learning. And each of us who undertakes this aspiration will need to negotiate and practice and learn.
Excellent. I think the key word there is experiment.
Yeah.
And I particularly like the phrase that you have of inquiry and action, because that is actually pointing to the experimental part. So you're doing inquiry and you are acting based on your inquiry, based on the results that you have. And then you are continuing the inquiry using the results of the action. So there is this continuous loop going on. And the beauty of it is that though perfection is not achieved, you get results to whatever scale you can, wherever you are. So you keep on making progress. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to sit on the top of Mount Olympus and take 20 years to figure it out, figure out the truth, and then I'm going to start action. This is a continuous loop of inquiry and action, continuing to proceed. And experiment is the key word. You're saying that you're going to experiment with everything. Wonderful. What was the third one?
The third one may have been the fundamental role of story.
Let me check. Give me a second. Yes, fundamental role of story. Yes.
What was it in our lives, or
yes, fundamental role of stories in our lives.
And so the motivation for that one is I really wanted to get to Buckminster Fuller's operating manual for Spaceship Earth. And Bucky can be challenging for people, especially people that have been trained in the STEM fields, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Bucky's writing is very expansive, connects a lot of ideas, and sometimes it sounds like he's being very particular. He is kind of an engineer at heart, but he's also a poet. And he tells these stories. And what are we to make of these stories? And so I said, to prepare everyone for this, the fourth topic on Buckminster Fuller's comprehensive thinking, which was a core motivation of the whole idea, I needed to do a preparatory event that broadly looked at the role of story and tried to show how story is fundamental in our lives. And one of the, there were several, that was a pretty long essay, as I remember. There was a lot in it. For me, the highlight is, what's her name? Mary, the mythologist,
Joseph Campbell, or
no, the woman, I blank on names. I link to her essay in that she's got this wonderful essay. There's also a video. People have reported back to me that the video is not as helpful. The essay, I think, gets to the point better. She tells this story of the truth in stories. That's her theme, the truth in stories, and how even fantasy, mythology, and fairy tale have a truth of inquiry and a truth of, could it be? Might it be? How could it be if it were? We're reading, this year, we're reading Dante's Great Commedia. And that's an incredible fantasy. This is the way I think it might be, but, it's clearly fantastic. No one to my knowledge has ever been to hell, purgatory, and heaven to meet God face to face and return to tell about it. That's a fantasy, but it's a wonderful fantasy. It's a fantasy that, as Dante suggests, reveals more truth than maybe the truthful story. Very often in the STEM fields, we think we found the truth, but sometimes it's a stale story. So
I found the third episode to be really fascinating because it showed real expansion of the scope of the project, because now we are going into mythology, stories in religion, which have been staple of humankind much longer than the science tradition. So you're going to a tradition which is much older and much deeper and still continues today. Whether, children, we tell stories to our children, and a lot is being communicated in those stories. So bringing that in to the discussion is what I got most from it.
Even in science, we tell stories. In fact, we tell myths, because in mathematics, we have this myth that the third dimension is created by extruding a point into a line, and then extruding the line into a plane, and then extruding the plane into a space. But that's a story. I'm not even, there are no axioms there. It's not even clear that that's the right way to think about space. But it's one of the stories we tell, and we have lots of stories, and many of them turn out to be not true.
Wonderful. The fourth episode was something I was really, really looking forward to, talking about your take on Buckminster Fuller. Go ahead.
Yeah, the comprehensive thinking of our Buckminster Fuller was my first attempt in the series, after 4 episodes, to try to lay out the real vision, instead of baby steps, to, preliminaries that we need to talk about so we're ready to have this bigger conversation. That was, I think, one of the video might even be better than the essay, because I think I was really charged that day, and I thought I hit the points really well. But the essay is the basis. I write the essays first, and then I dress them up for a script. Then increasingly I'm ad-libbing, but being inexperienced script reader, have been too much reading maybe at first. And so the videos can sometimes include little tweaks and embellishments that aren't in the essays. Bucky's thinking is very important. He starts with the universe, defined as all humanity's experiences, and he introduces ideas of the principle of synergy, that the behavior of whole systems is unpredictable from the behavior of the parts considered separately. These core ideas suggest not only that comprehensive thinking is a different way of thinking from what you've learned in school, but that it's necessary. If the principle of synergy, that the behavior of whole systems is unpredictable from the behavior of the parts, if that's true, and I don't know of any research to question it, and I know of lots of evidence that suggests it is true, then we have to consider things comprehensively, or we miss huge amounts of the meaning of it all. And so Bucky, and then we did the follow-up series going through
Yes.
Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, which was wonderful.
Yes, no, I got really excited about Bucky. So we went through the operating manual as a separate series, which is there in the both comprehensivist list as well as the Buckminster Fuller list. So that was great, because I think Buckminster Fuller approach me, for example, just this observation that you cannot predict the whole from parts. You have to look at the whole as such. That is very profound, and that is very different from the mechanistic approach that has dominated a lot of people's thinking. And they kind of say that, okay, I will just do this part and it will somehow come together, not realizing that, that the whole is not predictable. So I think that was huge. Next up, we went into the ethnosphere.
Yeah, Wade Davis's introduction to the ethnosphere. I wanted to build upon that first event, talking about traditions of inquiry and action, and really put an indigenous slant. I really wanted to open people's minds, if they weren't familiar with it already, of the power of indigenous thinking. Most of our pharmaceuticals are Western sciences, basic stealing of indigenous knowledge. We certainly didn't compensate them to the tune of the billions that our pharmaceutical industries have made. So Wade Davis wrote a book. No, actually, he was invited by the Canadian Public Radio, has an annual talk. And in 2009, he gave that talk, which is a week-long lecture, 5 lectures. And then they put those 5 lectures into a book. I have the book on the shelf behind me. And then he gave an hour-long lecture to the Long Now Foundation. And I really like that Long Now Foundation condensation of this 5-lecture series that he gave, that's in the book. And I used that video. there were several things going on. One thing was I wanted to show potential organizers of comprehensivist topics that if you can find a good video, you can use a video resource. It's the first event I organized that had a video as the featured resource. When you have a featured video as a resource, and then through an essay or an event description, you can organize some questions about that video, you can have a great event at 52 Living Ideas, at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And as part of my teaching by showing practice, I wanted to show people that with a good video resource, you can organize great events to expand our thinking. And then Wade Davis, in his discussion explaining the incredible wisdom of indigenous peoples all around the world, and how even today our science can't explain some of their knowledge, was just eye-opening of the limits of modern science, the potential of tapping into our oppressed but wise indigenous brethren to make a claim that thinking about understanding the world involves understanding the world from perspectives we haven't considered before, and treating these people that think so differently from us that we might have in the past called not even human, justifying oppression and slaughter in some cases, and realizing, no, comprehensivism is an aspiration that we should value all people, even people with much different outlook, perspective, philosophy, and values than we have. And so I really tried to push the limits of our thinking about just how comprehensive we need to be in order to come to understand the world and how it works, that we can't do it just within the Marxian framework or just within the capitalist framework. We need to expand our thinking.
Wonderful. I mean, one of the meetups that was inspired by that was Maritza's meetup on the Aborigines concept of Dreamtime. And that's an oral culture and very different from our culture. And it was amazing to discover that. And the absolutely cherry on top was that while we were doing this, somebody showed up in the meetup from Australia who had had extensive dealings with the Aborigines and was able to add a lot of more detail to what Maritza was saying. So that, definitely that was one of my favorite kind of consequences of this video.
And that was a great event. And I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see participants who know something about the Blackfoot or the Lenape, or, to find some video resource or some book that we can then do follow-ups, because there's insufficient understanding of this. I continue to do research. I've actually identified some videos. There will be some follow-ups at some point by me, but I'm trying to be comprehensive. I don't want to turn comprehensivism into Indigenous Studies 101. We want to study Aristotle, and we want to study the Dante and all the traditions. But the indigenous traditions deserve a lot more attention than they have been given, and most people don't know enough about it. And to be comprehensive, that's a very important component. I feel there should be, every few months we should have some topic that chips away at one more element of indigenous knowledge.
Wonderful. I also want to comment about the way in which you're using essays. I think that's working beautifully because you put a lot of thought into the essays so people can prepare for these meetups by reading them beforehand, reading the references that you give. And then that leads to people coming prepared for it. And then the beauty of the meetup format, the discussion format, is truly magical because you start with that. You create a very high base. You start with that. Your presentation is based on the essay. And then people get to discuss it in breakout rooms. And my favorite part is the part afterwards, when they are able to ask questions, raise kind of fundamental questions, give their fundamental observations about it. So this oral hermeneutics on the top of the written essay makes the experience far richer than the essay itself. But essay provides the core around which all of that discussion can be organized. So I think that this dance between the essay and the meetups is working very well.
The essays are necessary for me because I haven't read this stuff anywhere. I'm trying to invent this new tradition of inquiry and action that that takes a serious look at how to understand the whole world and each other. And it's, how do you do that? I don't even know how to do that. So I set in my mind, what do I think is the next thing we should explore? And then I spend 3 weeks exploring it, writing and rewriting and tweaking and cutting out and adding in until I have a little bit of thought through guidance to that's never thought through enough. And the brilliance of the participants through their questions and their comments, really, several cases I've had to add a comment at the end of my essay after the discussion. I finally realized this, that, and the other. They all need little footnotes and addendums, but it's a starting point. And at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society, I have a reputation for having overly prepared events that intimidate other participants from organizing. But when I look back at my history, I started organizing events at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society in 2010. Mm-hmm. And I look back at my first events and they weren't as rich, they were just putting it out there, and people liked those events too. But after you do it for 10 years, you don't want to just give a baby step, first cut like I did in 2010 and 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 and 15. It took me at least 5 years before there was any richness to my write-ups. They started off very simple. That's where, think of my essays as what you will be doing if you start now with just simple things and you keep at it once a month for 10 years. You'll be writing essays like this. I really don't think there's anything special about me. I'm a terrible writer. It takes me a long time to organize all this. But after you do it for 10 years, you start putting out essays that integrate things in ways that you couldn't do in year 1, 2, or 3. But if you don't organize an event every month and practice the art of writing it, getting your questions organized, finding resources, either videos or books or essays, and then presenting that and getting feedback. Oh, so many of my early events, all the feedback was, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about that. Yeah, comprehensivism is something that's very difficult. We have no training in. No one took a course in it. And so I think it's important for everyone to realize that, if you want to get better at it, you need to start organizing simple events. And most of your events have very modest, and the participants bring out the richness as opposed to the presenter. And that's the way to start. And if you do that month after month for year after year, you will, and hopefully I'll get better, because these are still taking me too much time. I can't just turn it off like, a habit. It's still a stretch for me each month.
Yeah, no, firstly, I want to say that your combination of ambition, humbleness, meticulous planning, and hard work is very inspiring. It's very inspiring. And second thing I have to say is that the feedback loop of actually doing it many times as the only way of progressing is profoundly true. I'm cheating by doing this every day instead of once a month in order to learn a little bit faster. So that's what I've been doing. And I invite everybody, don't be intimidated by the complexity of preparation, because there are two parts of it. It's choosing the object and making it very clear. As CJ was saying, you can just have a video. If you can properly select a video, maybe give a very short description of the video, that is enough to put things on the table. And then we have amazing groups, amazing people who show up, an amazing number of them who show up, and they are going to create the discussion. At the same time, there is no limit. You can prepare as much as you want, depending on, like, there are people who make elaborate presentations. At the most extreme, I was talking to this one presenter and I wanted him to present on something. He said, sure. He said, sure. I said, how about 45 minutes? He said, I need at least 1 hour, 45 minutes to make my point. And it was a profound point. So I said, sure, take 1 hour for, it is the most popular video that we have. But it can go from that to simply selecting something really, really interesting on this that shows you something new about comprehensivism. If that's all you did and wrote a very short and then came to the discussion. Other thing I want to say is that there are two different skills involved in doing the discussions. One is the content and the second is the moderating. Okay. Sometimes you are very good at content, sometimes you're very good at moderating. And don't worry, I'm here, Joe, Marisa, people like that are able to volunteer to do the moderating part. So if you just have content and you don't know how to do moderating or are afraid to do moderating, no worries, you can just come, just say, okay, I want to do a meetup on this, and you'll be able to do that. All right, wonderful. So the next one up is the value of multiple working hypotheses.
Yeah, Buckminster Fuller, in his definition of universe, basing universe on all humanity's experiences, there's a fundamental empirical basis for Bucky's work. And, does that have to be science? I think all of us as children, it's just the basic nature that experience is a fundamental thing. And, I probably did fundamental working hypotheses out of order with the George Polya one on I forget what that was called.
It was called Inductive Approach.
Yeah,
it is, let me see, Inductive Attitude, a moral basis for science and comprehensivism.
Yeah, I probably should, I should have reversed the order of the two on that one. That was one of my mistakes. Conceptually in my mind, I'm not getting the numbering right. Are we fifth or sixth? The Inductive Attitude, based on a George Polya book, this one, Mathematics and Plausible Reasoning, gets at this inductive idea. And then T.C. Chamberlain expands on the inductive attitude in a sense. T.C. Chamberlain talks about that he was a geologist. He wrote this essay in Science, one of the premier journals of science. Although in 1890, it wasn't clear that it was going to become as prestigious as it became. And he writes this essay in 1890. It's republished, and there are copies on the internet, so you can read it for free, on the method of multiple working hypotheses. And he recommends, as a new epistemic virtue for science, a moral reform for science, he calls it, that we should engage multiple working hypotheses because the discriminative edge of each will clarify and refine and help us see through how to either theoretically or experimentally distinguish the relative extent of, especially in geology, he was a geologist, when you have multiple causation and not just simple causation, you need to ferret out to what extent is this factor and the other factor contributing to global warming, for example. And these are very complicated situations that require us to consider multiple working hypotheses. There are still some scientists that believe you should make a working hypothesis and that you should pick a hypothesis and follow that hypothesis to the grave as a champion. And there may be some value to that. One of the things, I try to think of boundary cases in comprehensivism. Maybe in comprehensivism, we need a few comprehensivists who are just dogged specialists, who just, this is my hypothesis, I'm pretty sure it's right, and you take it to the grave, and I don't look at Aboriginal thought. And maybe we need a few people like that. If we're going to be comprehensivists, maybe we need to say some comprehensivists are dogged specialists, and some comprehensivists may have no specialty, and other comprehensivists may have 5 specialties or 3, or, we don't know what the right kind of comprehensivist is yet. We have some examples from history. There's Aristotle, there's Ibn Sina, Ibn al-Haytham, Dante, Leonardo, Buckminster Fuller, but you're probably not going to be like any of them. So you're going to have to forge your own quality of comprehensivism. Do you want to be more onesies and twosies in terms of breadth, or in T.C. Chamberlain's case, really embracing that to really find out what's going on, you need to discriminate multiple working hypotheses.
The thing I like about the multiple working hypothesis is that it's a cure for confirmation bias. We get that's a killer. We hold some ideas, and we're just looking at facts that match those ideas, and not really paying attention to things that they don't that don't match. Having multiple hypotheses is shakes you up from that one linear line, and kind of keeps you open to the rest. So fantastic. Next one is going to be the Polya one, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, what's great about that essay is it's in the public domain. They forgot to put a copyright notice, and at the time that meant it formed into the public domain. So you can get that book free online, and I was able to quote extensively. And Polya's writing is amazing. If you read the book, there's a lot of mathematics in it that might be intimidating, but I found the parts that are conceptual and philosophical and accessible and that really lay out the value of the inductive attitude. And it seems to me it's a little different from Buckminster Fuller's approach, because Polya, well, there's a tension perhaps between Bucky and Polya, George Polya. Polya thinks that, it's very difficult to challenge one of our beliefs. So we might as well keep our beliefs until there's some evidence that maybe they're not right. I think what I get from Bucky is sort of an iconoclastic thinker that embraces challenging our belief. Bucky says at one point, I have no beliefs. Everything I figure out through experience. There's a hard-nosed empiricist, but Polya's approach to empiricism is don't challenge all your beliefs. You'll get into analysis paralysis or something. Instead, just pay attention to the evidence. If the evidence challenges one of your beliefs, then maybe you do need to look at it. And but then Polya says, if the evidence starts to show you that the old belief is not, I don't know how he says it. In my terms, I would say integrated, is not cohering, is not agreeing with the evidence from experience, then we should change our beliefs. A lot of people don't want to do that. If the evidence is against their belief, they want to stick to their beliefs. And, maybe, certainly you don't want to abandon your beliefs at the first sign of contradictory evidence. But it may be that that the evidence is strong and you should change your beliefs. And that's, I don't think we solved that issue, but it was under the scenes if you look for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is that these meetups keep getting better and better. I always like the next one was Mystique.
Yeah, Mystique. That whole series, starting with Bucky's Comprehensive Thinking, which was a book-based topic. Then the Ethnosphere was a video-based topic. The T.C. Chamberlain Multiple Working Hypothesis was an essay. That's a short essay that everyone should read. It's a great essay. The Polya one on experience was my curation of quotes from a big book. You don't want to read the whole book, and you wouldn't find those quotes if someone didn't curate them for you. Then with Mystique, we have another, like the T.C. Chamberlain one, where there's this wonderful Buckminster Fuller essay, Mystique. And it was available online when I led the topic, and then I guess they took it down. You can get that essay in several books. I think I went back and edited the essay and put in, when the link disappeared, I went back in and changed the link to a description. Here's how you can find the essay. It's a great essay. It's a fantastic essay. The idea that we only learn through mistakes. Look at a baby. Have you ever seen a baby that figured out how to walk without falling down once? Maybe only twice? No, they fall down a lot. Fortunately, they're small and close to the ground and usually doesn't hurt them. But we only learn from mistakes. I mean, you'd have to be a god to come into the world and, be able to explain Einstein's equation and, integral calculus without, making your first arithmetic mistake. I continue to make arithmetic mistakes. It's you don't get over mistake making. As adults, we learn to hide them better, and we try to pretend that they don't exist sometimes. Coming to have this mystique, this sense that our mistakes are the important thing. And in that essay, I then brought in Stuart Firestein's wonderful little, he's got two at least, videos on ignorance. And he's a neuroscientist at, is it NYU or Columbia? NYU. He argues that science is more about ignorance than knowledge. And it's a wonderful book. It really inspired me that Bucky's idea, he almost didn't go far enough. He did. If you read that essay, Bucky really understood it. And to me, Bucky and Stuart Firestein are saying the same thing in completely different language. And in that essay, I tried to bring them together, that ignorance, what we don't know, the questions as opposed to the assertions, the claims, are the real knowledge of science. And Bucky is somewhat saying that too. In other places, Bucky isn't so clearly saying that. In other places, I hear Bucky trying to adopt the imperial language that science had adopted throughout most of the 20th century of, this experiment proves, and now it's an ironclad fact. Well, yeah, but wait 50 years and most science gets amended. This issue of the mistakes and the questions and the ignorance started a theme. There have been, through last month's topic and Wednesday's topic coming up, this theme of mistake, mystique, and ignorance have become a guiding theme of a series of topics where I've been elaborating on this important notion.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it has inspired other meetups, like Joe did a meetup on ignorance itself. That
the book,
the book. So we had that as well. I think this is a very big deal. The idea of, I like Sapolsky's idea of strong beliefs weakly held. I like the OODA loop, where you're kind of continuously applying your ideas and looking for evidence, observing very carefully the results to update them. So our Bayesian thinking, all of it is about accepting the fact that we are going to make mistakes and being open to that, and having a method of commitment to noticing mistakes and not be fazed by it, and keep on correcting them as we go along. All right, what was the next one? Let me see. Next one was rethinking change and evolution. Is Genesis ongoing?
So one of my friends, Christopher Zeloff, a filmmaker, said, you're not talking enough about design. You're talking all about this, epistemology, knowledge, learning kind of mindset. And I said, you're right. I got to get more design in. And I've led at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society at least 25 topics on design. And what I've learned from that experience is that most of the kind of people that show up at Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society events do not identify themselves as designers, do not identify themselves as creatives, but all of us have gone through, maybe not all of us, but almost all of us have gone through at least 12 years of primary education, perhaps a year or 2 or 4 of university or more. And the focus in our educational system is not on teaching you to design, not on teaching you to build things, although you might have taken a shop class, and I did, and you might have had some art classes where you create some things and learn how to use scissors and glue. But to really think about design, when I really got into Buckminster Fuller in college, in my senior year, I said, I've done all these classes on mathematics and learning, and so I signed up for a 3-dimensional design studio and took my first art class in college. And but so my background is a little bit more biased toward knowledge and knowing and inquiry, but the action, the design, the doing, and the way in which a lot of people think about the designed world is as an evolutionary process. We think, all those technologists, they're inventing the world, and the world is evolving, and we try to pretend that we can see the arrow of evolution. And so that event was an attempt to rebalance the ship of state of the series of topics to bring design in. The first sentence on page 1 of the Design Way is Genesis is ongoing. The idea that creation is an ongoing process, that we create it. It's not just created through our creatives and our artists and our designers, it's created through our conversations. Our fiction is a word that originally means creation. Our fiction is created, and our nonfiction is created too, because it's created by language and writing, which is, but in that event, we focused on this idea of Genesis is ongoing. Then I did a quick survey of, Richard Lewontin. Richard Lewontin's thinking on evolution is very important, I think. I have a friend, Alice Santoro, who I learned really likes Richard Lewontin's work. And I should talk to her and maybe Joe and Maritza, and we should do a series on Richard Lewontin's 3-video sequence on evolution. I think it's a really, I led meetups on that for the Thinking Society. And my takeaway was Lewontin is brilliant, but maybe it needs a little more curation than at that time in my life I was able to provide. I don't think you can do it with one event. I don't think you can do it with 3 events. You might need 5 or 6. It's conceptually difficult. He's got a perspective that's not well enough understood. It's a brilliant perspective. And I just surveyed it in that essay. And then I think I did a 3rd thing in that essay, but I'm forgetting.
Wonderful. Let's see, what was the next one after that? The next one was how to create that which is not yet.
To create that which is not yet is another expression from the design way. And the idea is, if Genesis is ongoing, how do we create our futures? You know, how do we? So I developed in that one a model for how evolution change, especially intentional change, develops from our desiderata. And that you know, I just had a discussion on Facebook with some people. No, desire is faulty. We need to focus on our needs. And I pulled out some quotes from the design way. They have a bunch of quotes about how needs are biased. You know, do we really want to be needy people? What are our needs? Who's telling me what my need is? Why don't I need my desires? You know, we didn't get into that in my essay, but it's context. The essay, I took the radical view. I mean, some people think it's radical that we should actually pay attention to not just our desires, but all of them, our desiderata, the full set of our desires. And that from these desires, we might want to create a more desirable future, a more desirable world. How, and if you do decide that there's something about the world that you would desire different, how do you go about creating that which is not yet? And so I presented a very elementary first cut overview of that process of how do we create our futures. And I tried to do it abstractly enough so that it applies to our conceptual world and the world of bricks and mortar and you know, geodesic domes and tensegrity structures, and you know, the world that we create with our hands and our materials and our industrial processes.
Wow, and this keeps. I mean, I'm looking at topic after topic, and I'm seeing, oh, this one I like better. The next one is how to explore the future and why.
Yeah, I found this wonderful video by Angela Ogantala, and I decided to use Angela Ogantala's presentation. She's wonderful. Watch the video. The video might be better than the essay. But what I do in the essay is I try to pull out the parts of Angela Ogantala's presentation that talk, you know, the first fundamental principle of the future is that it does not exist. No one knows what the future is going to be. Not, you know, some of us think we do, but we're usually wrong. You know, I as I was searching for that essay, I found at least one report where they looked back at futurists from 50 years ago, and you know, they were basically all somewhat right. You know, in some sense, they had some qualities that were right, but in all the specifics, they were pretty much wrong. So, you know, our best futurists are usually wrong. And Angela Ogantala has been trained in futurism, which is an academic discipline that's developed to study the future. And what professional futurists like Angela Ogantala tell us is that we can't know the future. But what we can do is we can think about the future. We can imagine this scenario and that scenario, and we can try to use that to help figure out what we would desire. Do we desire a future where our computers have this incredible AI that we become, you know, little ants feeding on the detritus of a computer mind civilization. Is that what we want? And all the other scenarios, and Angelo Gantala emphasizes that science fiction tends to give us these same old things that bring us to the talking phone, as if the talking phone was obviously the ultimate destination for civilization. Well, as Angelo Gantala points out, we got the talking phone in 2010 or so, and it's making its impact, but was it worth all that time on Star Trek and all the other science fiction? Was it really the most worthy invention that we should have been spending our science fiction readers' mental energy building toward the talking watch? Angelo Gantala actually suggests that we go to Caribbean science fiction and Nollywood, the Nigerian film industry, to find new ways of thinking about the future. This ties back into T.C. Chamberlain's multiple working hypotheses, the basic idea of comprehensivism, that we want a broad range of traditions of inquiry and action, Wade Davis and the ethnosphere, that there are other cultures that think about the future, not just Hollywood. It doesn't have to be, someone trying to hunt you down for a crime you haven't yet committed because the AI has determined that you're going to commit a crime and they want to stop it.
Yeah. The next one up was Redressing the Crisis of Ignorance.
Yeah, so the topic on Mystique, that video's gotten a lot of hits, I noticed. I don't know why. But I was very disappointed with the essay on Mystique. I felt I missed the mark. And so Buckminster Fuller had written about the crises of ignorance, mainly with respect, I researched it, mainly the evidence I found is he was talking about the oil crisis, the oil embargo of 73, and the fact that, Bucky realized we needed to get off oil a long time ago. His argument, which was always so obvious to me after I heard it from him, that, even today, I don't believe there are too many parents of very, very rich people who say, don't go out and make your mark on the world, just live off your inheritance. No, you should go out and make more money, contribute to society. Everyone believes that we should all contribute to society, I think. Should we live off our inheritance? The fossil fuels are our inheritance. That's a cosmic cash bank that we've been burning for 100 years. And it's a finite resource. And we're burning our cosmic savings account. Why would you do that? Would you burn your grandfather's money just so that you don't have to work? No, of course, we should, contribute to the world and learn and participate and be, enjoy our lives, not just live off our cosmic savings accounts. So the crises of ignorance had that origin in Bucky's lexicon, but I expanded it. I took the idea and tried to survey, I think it was 4 crises of ignorance to try, and they weren't all negative about ignorance. One of the things that I tried to do counterintuitively is to argue that we need more ignorance, that ignorance is something we should value, the mystique of ignorance, the mystique of mistakes, the questions. These are an important, the crisis of ignorance is that we don't realize how important our ignorance is. We don't value it and think carefully about how to refine our ignorance and strengthen our ignorance. And I think I reread that one a week or two ago, and I think that one really hit some points that I think are important. I don't know what you think, but I don't know what everyone else thinks. But I think those crises of ignorance really hit some of the big problems in our world today that comprehensivism is the answer for. That essay is my first real draft for trying to turn the idea of comprehensivism into maybe a manifesto. This is what we're doing it for and why, and let's solve these crises of ignorance.
The way I experience it personally is that it's your not realizing your ignorance that stops you. Because the moment you realize that you don't know, your mind is free to start making connections. Like if you think that you know something and you don't know it, then you are actually saying, okay, I don't need any more information on this. So it just stops you before. So I think, admitting ignorance and embracing ignorance is a huge, it basically is liberating your mind to do its work.
And we're reading Dante. We've got a Dante meeting coming up this afternoon. And Doug Jacobs and I have been talking about this, with the muses. Why does Dante and all the ancient poets, why do they ask the muses for the wisdom to write about this ineffable thing that you cannot say? And as Doug Jacobs points out, usually when a poet invokes the muses and says how utterly impossible it is, I need Apollo's help, I need Calliope's help to bring this poetry so that you, the reader, won't have your ship fall over. And the ancient poetic wisdom was that to write powerful, penetrating poetry and describe the world in metaphoric, poetic terms, you first need to admit your ignorance, and ask for help from the muses, the 9 muses, and Apollo, their leader. And Dante does this, and this is the crises of ignorance, and the way you just described that is sort of a modern, take the mythology out of it, take the muses out of it, but it's basically an age-old idea that we've forgotten because we've abandoned mythology, we've abandoned the epic poets, focused on a materialist science, and lost the importance of ignorance. We have Stuart Firestein, we have Buckminster Fuller's Mystique, and I'm trying to pull these traditions together, and in that essay, take a stand that one of the big crises of ignorance is that we don't embrace and welcome our ignorance. In fact, refine our ignorance. We're not trying to just, earlier in my life, I would, I regret it now, but I'd read a book, what is the key idea? And then take it away as this imperial notion of I've reached the truth. But really a much more effective and profound way to think about it is that your assertions that you've gathered all this evidence in support of, the extent that that's powerful and useful and good is that you've asked a battery of questions and you've organized a battery of memories and experiments, what have you, to compare and contrast and refine those questions with this emerging, maybe it is the way the world works, it's starting to look promising, but if tomorrow someone comes up with an experiment that shows it invalid or that there's another way to think about it that's better, you still produced value. You still have all the questions and how all the evidence and experiences you've arrayed to understand those questions better and refine the questions and refine. And by either end of this year or early next year, we're going to get to a very important concept of interpretation and judgment. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm leading to as a bit of foreshadowing.
Fantastic. So we'll come to the preview of what is coming up, but we have got two more things that we have already finished. And one of them is looking at comprehensivism in a place where most people do not focus on, and that is the Islamic Golden Age.
The Islamic Golden Age. So I found this BBC series of 3 videos that are on YouTube, organized an event at the Thinking Society. And, you know, we have in the West this Eurocentric view of science, where science began with Francis Bacon, or maybe it was Roger Bacon. You know, I don't know why it has to be a bacon, but and the truth is that the European translation movement of the 11th century was inspired by the Islamic translation movement of the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries. And the Islamic Golden Age, when Europe was a backwater, they used to use this disparaging term, the Dark Ages. It's going out of style. Historians never talk about the Dark Ages anymore. Even in Europe, there weren't Dark Ages. There were great thinkers and writers throughout the so-called Dark Ages. But Europe was a backwater. It was in civil war. It was ununified. The Islamic Empire spanned from Spain all the way to Afghanistan. So it was this huge empire, larger than the Roman Empire in many senses. And they inherited the learning from the Roman Empire, Ptolemy and Aristotle and the Babylonian traditions. And we don't recognize and acknowledge that the Islamic influence, both Ibn Sina and Ibn al-Haytham wrote important treatises on science that were widely discussed in Europe before the printing press. I'm not sure, but one really good hypothesis is the reason Europe forgot about the Islamic tradition. Part of it was their races, they did not, they fought crusades. The Christians started the crusades. It wasn't the Muslims that came to Europe to convert the Christians. It was the Christians that invaded Islamic territories to convert them to Christianity. The Islamic world had the peace and the stability for science to flourish. And it very much seems that key elements of modern science's epistemic values, almost certainly Ibn al-Haytham, although, as I've read more about it, it was the whole culture. Even Ibn Sina was thinking, systematically look at your assumptions, systematically look at your theories, and then test them with experience. Aristotle didn't have a view of systematic experimentation. Aristotle knew about experimentation. Aristotle was an experimenter. He did dissections. He did a lot of important work in the science of biology, as well as his important role in philosophy. But his idea was more of a dialectical exploration with a memory recall of some experiences and experiments, not that as part of your scientific investigation, you systematically look for experience and experiments to validate your assumptions and your theories. Ibn Sina, Ibn al-Haytham, and their peers were starting to do this. And the printing press comes in what, the 1400s. And the books that started to be written after 1400 started to forget about the earlier books that had to be hand copied. And some of that connection with Islam. So the books that were printed and mass produced in Europe that became the intellectual foundation for Europe were the ones that were written after 1450. But by that time, Europe had a good scientific tradition going. And they started forgetting because, they didn't have the scholarship we have today where you really want to trace back your citations 1,000 years. Actually, we don't usually do that either, do we? So the Islamic contribution got lost, probably because the printing press gave the rapid growth in Europe. And one of the theories that's put in that video series, the 3 videos I highlighted there, is that the Islamic world so valued their calligraphy that maybe they didn't adopt the printing press because it didn't do justice to the calligraphy of the gorgeous, reverently appreciated Arabic script. And if that's true, it might be that the reason Europe took off and the Islamic world didn't keep pace was because they didn't adopt the printing press quickly enough. And it might be that if they had had the wisdom to adopt the printing press, Europe would still be the backwater of the world, and the Islamic would have been able to maintain the power of their civilization against Europe's rise. Who knows? But
I mean, one of the things that I always thank the Islamic culture for is being the transmission mechanism from the ideas like the zero and the place value notation to the West, because that's how it came here. And that is crucial. What mathematics is, what computation is made possible with that notation is like an order of magnitude easier, probably more.
Fibonacci's book was in the 1200s, I believe, and he had the privilege of traveling to the Islamic world. His family was a merchant, and learning these traditions, and then writing the book that taught Europe arithmetic. And that certainly that was one of the prerequisites for Europe's eventual ascendancy, was learning the valuable, and this is comprehensivism. It's translation. It's bringing cultures together. And we explored that in that event. And it's very important.
And it also highlights the importance of travel. So you're talking about Fibonacci's family going there. So you actually need the contact with other cultures. At that time, it was through actual travel. So there is this commerce going on, commerce of ideas, commerce of traditions going on between cultures through that. The last one that you have done so far is shifting perspectives and representing the truth.
Trisha Wong. Trisha Wong's video, her video is called Don't Trust the Truth. Very provocative title that gets lots of people's ire going. But in my interpretation of Trisha Wong's exquisite video is that she's really focused on the value and importance of shifting our perspective. And she critiques through art history the blindness and the difficulties that come from trying to believe that this one perspective is the truth. And she's criticizing modern virtual reality and AI, that, here we have all this data from the last 20 years, or maybe the last 30 years. And somehow from computer statistical analysis of past data, we can predict exactly how the economy will behave in a pandemic. One of the things people, there are all these, the supply chain is messed up, why is the supply chain messed up? Didn't the AI know about pandemics and how to predict how all the economic activity so that all the companies could proactively? No, they fired all their people that understood how the business worked and went on instruments. And their instruments told them how to react. And the reaction created a supply chain bottleneck that hasn't been worked through yet, because we need 5 more years of computer data to train the AI to learn how to work out of it, because we don't have the people that know. Maybe. Trisha Wong has this value of shifting perspectives, the human art of shifting perspectives, which, I know a little bit about AI algorithms. They don't know how to shift perspectives. It's not part of the programming. No one, to my knowledge, no one has written the AI algorithm for shifting perspectives. I'd love to see that one. I don't know how you'd write it. How would you start? So there's shifting perspectives and representing the truth. Trisha Wong, if you listen to her essay, she basically is critiquing representing the truth. And as much as I love her presentation and her ideas, I suggested that the way to represent the truth, that she just didn't see deeply enough into it, the way to represent the truth is through the shifting perspectives, the multiple working hypotheses of T.C. Chamberlain, and getting to a refined ignorance. And that you represent the truth with refined ignorance. And I don't know, maybe my philosophy professors would critique that thesis, but I'm waiting for someone to show me where I'm wrong.
Wonderful. So folks, what we're going to do is that we're going to be discussing these at a higher level. We're going to be taking multiple of these essays and meetups that CJ has done, and we're going to be exploring ideas across. So we'll take a theme of ignorance, for example, and give links to multiple things, multiple videos CJ has done about ignorance. And we're going to be discussing that in our Friday series of deep conversations. CJ, can you give a little bit of preview about what's coming up? What essays you have planned for? You've got about 9 essays planned.
Well, Wednesday is the whole shebang. To understand all and put everything together. It's a long riff on a quote from R. Buckminster Fuller's Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And I'm trying to capture 3 important aspects in which the whole, or the principle or attributes of wholeness, play into comprehensivist exploration, comprehensive exploration. When we explore comprehensively, what wholes do we need? We need the whole of the premises from which we begin. There's the whole of our deliberation and our exploration, and there's the whole of the output that we produce from our comprehensive exploration. And this essay attempts to touch the important notion of the whole or wholeness in comprehensivism, which is a subject that I've mentioned in passing at many points. It's implicit in the principle of synergy we talked about earlier, the behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of the parts, so that there's some important aspect of the whole. Can we tune into the whole as part of our comprehensive inquiry and action? And if we do tune into it, what do we find? Is there something there? Is it a value? The proposal in this essay that it is a value, that you don't notice it if you don't look. And that in some sense, it's a guiding principle for comprehensive exploration.
Wonderful. What is coming up in October?
In October, I have this nice R. Buckminster Fuller essay, Man with a Chronophile, I think it's called. It's a short essay, like 4 pages, from the Saturday Review in April 1st, 1967. And it's an essay where I believe, well, I just read it a day or two ago again. Bucky's essays can be interpreted in multiple ways. I don't pretend that my interpretation of Bucky is the only right one, first way to interpret Bucky, but I'm going to interpret Bucky in this essay as another iteration on comprehensive thinking. So it's going to be an essay that touches comprehensive thinking, and I'm going to try to use the essay to pull together a whole bunch of issues we've discussed today and that have been highlighted. I'm hoping it's going to be easier for me to write, because I was hoping to have an easy one. I don't know how it'll turn out. One of the miracles of the writing process for me is that what I think is going to happen and what my intention is usually does come out in the end, but the way in which I think it's going to come out usually doesn't come out in the end. And it's a discovery, creative process of wrestling with a text, in this case, this very short 4-page Buckminster Fuller essay that's freely available online. And I'll be writing an essay trying to thread comprehensive thinking through that essay to help us see, reveal, explore more aspects of comprehensivism.
Wonderful. So we've been working on Dante for months now, and the culmination comes in November. So how are you going to approach Dante?
That's the one I'm worried about. That's why I want the October one to be a little lighter for my preparation. So I picked a short 4-page Bucky essay. I know Bucky, I've read this essay multiple times. I like it. It has some things, and I'm hoping I can just whip it out. Now, it probably won't happen. It'll probably take me, 30 hours of work, but I'm going to try. Dante's tough. I find reading poetry it's not my biggest skill. 10 years ago, I took the free online Yale Open Courses class. Jeannie and I went through it with Giuseppe Mazzotta's video lectures, and Jeannie and I read it, and we watched the videos, and I took extensive notes on the videos. I got into it very deeply. My notes aren't helping me at all for this November essay, because what I was interested in 10 years ago was learning that the Dark Ages weren't dark. I was amazed in my first reading of Dante just how rich European culture was circa 1320. I thought that was the Dark Ages, and the Renaissance hadn't even started yet. And Dante cites all these authors, Christian, European authors, Islamic authors, from the 600s, the 800s, the 1000s, and I was chasing all the references to all these scholars and I had never taken European history in college. We studied it in high school, of course. I think everyone in our country does. But what I want to do, the whole, when Doug Jacobs is the one who really helped catalyze the Dante series. I was talking to Doug and others about how I felt Dante shows prior art in the history of comprehensive thinking. And as my Islamic topic, which looked at the prior art of, there's a historical question when you're writing a book or leading a series of events. What's the history of this idea? Did comprehensivism develop with our Buckminster Fuller and his introduction of the term comprehensivity and comprehensivist? He did use the term comprehensive thinking. Are those terms the foundation of comprehensivism, or does it have older roots? In the Islamic topic, I came down with my first answer. Yes, it has earlier roots. It's Islamic foundation. But I had actually divined, because I had read Dante 10 years ago, that Dante shows that comprehensivism was alive and well in 1300s Europe, well before Leonardo. And so the first gloss of what I'm trying to achieve in November is documenting the history of comprehensivism, that there are important elements of comprehensive thinking that were known to Dante. But the reason I wanted to reread it this year was not just because it's the 700th anniversary, but because I'm thinking of writing this book to build and consolidate the tradition of comprehensive thinking that I'm trying to imagine and invent here. Or maybe Bucky invented it, or maybe Dante invented it. But if Dante invented it, Giuseppe Mazzotta didn't teach comprehensivism. He taught Dante. He taught how to interpret poetry. He taught what is Dante talking about. He didn't talk about why we should all be comprehensivists and how to be a comprehensivist. So I am going to try through, I've been reading it pretty deeply, although I worry that I haven't been reading it deeply enough. I mean, Dante is it makes analysis paralysis poignant. Because as you start reading it, you know, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. Finally, you read 2 or 3 books about Avicenna, and you know, you're 3 weeks behind in reading the poem to keep up with the rest of the group and the promise of having an essay in November. So the goal is to talk about the history of comprehensivism and to try to find, if I can, I hope I can, some threads of comprehensivist wisdom in Dante's writing that we can use as Dante's lecture to us on how and why we should explore comprehensively how and why Dante thought of comprehensive inquiry and action. I may or may not succeed. Tune in November and watch me stumble or hobble through it. We'll see.
Wonderful. Now, you've not been attending the Dante meetups, but I know that you're watching the videos. I'm very curious about what is your, what are you getting from watching the videos? What are your thoughts about what we're doing?
The videos, I really love your methodology of first engaging the people who have read it to make whatever comments they want, then to gather questions, and this crowdsourcing way of gathering questions and then refining them to a crowdsourced answer. It's not answering, it's addressing of the questions, which frequently result in more questions, which is the way it should be. It's a wonderful methodology. I really enjoy it. I had decided early in the year to write an weekly email. I knew we had a tight schedule. With this schedule, you're supposed to be reading 3 cantos of Dante every week. And I, as my social impresario imagination suggested, that to keep everyone on track, they would benefit from a weekly email. So I try to write an email every week to those people who have signed up. And once a month, my email is a reflection on the videos. So I take the videos and reflect on, if someone made a factual error, I might correct. If somebody said something that really inspired me, I might elaborate. Here's the verse, so that you can go back and find what people were talking about. And that whole process, writing those weekly emails, and watching the videos and trying to is all part of my process of trying to get ready to write this essay in November.
No, I love this. Yeah, go ahead. I love this dance between written and oral. So Dante has written, we are all reading, and then we are talking about it. And you get so much richness added to it. And what you're doing is that you're taking the next step of taking that written and converting it back into taking that oral dialogue and converting it back into written, both as your commentaries, monthly commentaries on the discussion, and then kind of culminating in essays. So I love this kind of going from writing into oral, because there is a power in terms of talking about comprehensivity. There is the work of Walter Ong. He writes about orality and literacy. And the point he makes is that oral communication is embodied communication. You see the person in front of you. They're gesturing with their body. The tone of their voice is carrying the values, the emotions that they have about the material. And the words are writing in that entire rich context. When you look at writing, that context is not there. You kind of have to recreate it as best as you can. You can't really recreate the original one. So doing this dance between writing and oral, it's a very powerful way of engaging a lot more of our faculties, our ability to move, our person as such, our emotions, our intuitions, and doing that in a group is even more powerful because it's not just your context, but it is everybody else's context that is being brought to bear on that written work. So I think it makes it far more rich. Wonderful. So the next one is going to be in December. You're doing the ethics of our critical path. What is that?
I might, I don't know how this is going to go. Well, I'm certain of October and November.
Mm-hmm. Or how about you just give an indication of what you're planning to do next? We won't hold you to it.
In Buckminster Fuller's Critical Path, which is a book on the shelf, I don't think it's visible. He has some wonderful passages about, what was my title again?
The title is about critical paths. So ethics of our critical
ethics.
path.
He has some ethics, ethics and epistemic ethics, which is epistemic virtues, which is the values of what we know. He has some wonderful ethical statements about inclusivity, each individual as a force to be cherished and valued, and I think that is an angle that should be part of a book on comprehensivism. And so what I'm doing for imagining future topics is I'm imagining a book and I'm imagining what needs to go in the book that hasn't been talked about yet. And a little bit more depth on the epistemic values and the social and humanistic values that belong in comprehensivist tradition. And so I had identified a few passages that I thought, if I collect this, and this, and write an essay on it and have a discussion, it will articulate some of these interests. And another important trend of future topics, there, in this Design Way book, there's this wonderful passage and chart diagram on the measurements of life.
Mhm.
And, we come in a culture which is so science oriented and measurement, but what's brilliant about the author of this, Harold G. Nelson and Eric Stoltenman, the authors of this book, is that, they're comprehensivists too, I have to say, and they embrace measurements of life that we ordinarily don't associate with scientific measurement, and they bring it into the measurement tradition. And one interpretation would be that they abstract measurement to make it more human, more social science, more humanities, more artistic, more design. It's a much richer treatment of measurement. And so I want to start with that. I led this one at the Thinking Society. And it's a powerful concept that they have in this book that I think, and that's going to lead into a follow-up. I think there's going to be a series of 3, maybe 4, maybe 2. I don't, it's going to be early next year, so I've got some time to sort it out.
And then
that looks at interpretation. So we measure. Okay, now we've got our measurements and we've made our assessment, but how do we interpret that? Does interpretation require integration with your desiderata, what you desire, or do you have abstract interpretations coming from an ethics tradition, or what is involved in that? And then probably the third is going to be judgment, because to act in the world and to inquire in the world both require the art of judgment. Is my inquiry too broad? Is my inquiry too deep? Is my inquiry engaging this value system too much or too little? What am I trying to do? What are my desiderata? What is the future that I would desire to bring about? It's a profound issue of judgment. And this book has a chapter on judgment that you could do probably 30 meetups.
Wow.
It analyzes judgment, the history of judgment. It is, if you're interested in judgment, you could read this book and trace each of the ideas and then just write an essay on each paragraph. It's like they just write a paragraph to survey it, comprehensivist survey of judgment, human judgment. But if you were to take each one of those paragraphs into an event, you would not disappoint your audience.
Wow. Wow. Now I'm looking forward to exploring that book, because I've noticed the number of times you held the book up. It has not escaped me. So we have to look at that in great amount of detail. So firstly, I think the series has been incredible. So what I want to do is I want to start working on the topics you've already put on the table, because really what matters is how much you internalize these ideas and start using them. So I want to revisit those topics. I also want to let people know that your ultimate goal is to actually encourage people to be doing more discussions. And I don't want to wait till the book is published to get started. I want to do it now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to create a whole bunch. I've created a playlist just for CJ's videos. It's called Collaborating for Comprehensiveness Resource Center by CJ Fearnley. So look at that. And there's links to his resource center. That's one place where you can find all this material. And I encourage you to, talk to us, talk to both me at 52 Living Ideas and to CJ at the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society to say that I want to do more meetups. I want to organize meetups. And what we'll do is that there is this stable of ideas. So even if you took one of the essays that CJ has, you can do a great meetup on that, even without CJ, okay, by yourself. You can delve deep into those ideas. All the material is already there, okay? It's like prefabricated meetup. Here it is, just you can build it on your own, okay? So that's what we have. Do you want to make any closing thoughts about your book, about anything that you want to say?
There are a couple.
Please, take your time.
So one, we absolutely need your help to, I need your help to finish writing this book, to learn what it is that I don't know yet that you need to be successful in organizing your comprehensive exploration. If you would like to be a comprehensive thinker and would like to take our challenge up and organize one topic a month, one topic every 2 months, one topic a week, maybe not.
Or one topic a day, which is what I do. It's actually easier if you're doing it daily. It's just part of your day. It's just very easy. Okay.
I really would like to have like 5 or 10 proteges to train and work through the process, and then learn what additional topics that need to go into future events I organize, and what needs to be in the book to help someone like you begin your comprehensive thinking your set of experiments to explore comprehensive thinking. You're going to go in your own way. There's no right way to do it. And if you have hurdles and bang-ups, in fact, the ideal person would be someone who just doesn't know how to do it and needs hand-holding, because then, that's the biggest test for how do we actualize this? How do we realize this? How do we make this work? How does comprehensivism become an esteemed living tradition that has many practitioners around the world? Someone who can't see how to do that might be the best one, because then as we work together in getting you on your way, I'll learn, of course, I needed to do a topic on that. I needed to do, what are the skills and preparations you need? Well, I might guess a few of them, and then we try it on you and it doesn't work. And if you have the patience to work with us, we will figure out how to make that process work so that you can have your dedicated comprehensive exploration sessions where you iterate, as I've done for the last 10 years, in gaining the art of comprehensivity, the art of comprehensive thinking, and learning how it works for you, which I hope is very different from me. And we don't want you to be like me. and you probably can't. And I can't be like you, you know, and maybe if there was another idea, I've temporarily lost it.
Sure. So folks, what we're going to do is that on September 24th, we are starting this off. So the whole purpose of creating this video was to give you a starting point. So you'll watch some of CJ's videos, watch this video, join us on September 24th, Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. We're doing a series on deep conversations, and the topic is going to be everything that CJ has done, reviewing everything, talking about what have you learned from it, what else can be done, and we will put up the video. So we'll give the feedback to CJ about that, and we can do this on a continual basis as we go through, because what happens is that it's not TV. Okay, you're not watching this on TV. What it is that what really matters is you engaging it and you doing it. So be a part of this and let's see what we can do together. So CJ, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us into your home and letting us do this great conversation. And I'm really looking forward to the book. And what I want to do is I want to create the audience for the book before the book is published. So when it is published, it will just accelerate things further and scale things further. I want to work out how to do all of this. The great thing is that the combination of what I already am doing and what you are trying to do, they match so closely that we will be able to make massive amount of progress in the 9 months before your book hopefully comes out, or whenever it comes out.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to watching some of these videos.
Yes. We'll talk behind your back about your ideas.
Yeah.
All right. See you, folks. See you soon.